All right, folks, so we're going to make one more video for this weekend, and this one I think is going to be a big ass problem for a lot of people in terms of their morality and ethics, and in terms of their political position, their social position, their perceived personal status, and those of others. So the big problem is this, okay? We have people who call themselves Christians. We have people who call themselves honest people, non-criminals. And we have people who call themselves the hardworking backbone of the country, okay? But here's the thing that we don't have. What we do not have is a legal system that effectively prosecutes criminal behavior to the point where, say, there's some reasonable percentage of crimes that are actually prosecuted successfully to the point where the person who committed the crime is arrested, charged, tried, and convicted of the crime, and the jury or judge that found them guilty of the crime is truly and honestly convinced beyond a shadow of a doubt that this person is responsible for the crime. They're not being charged for things they didn't do, for a crime for something they didn't do. They're not being charged for what they have done for something that a crime that doesn't apply to what they did. And there's no personal bias or prejudice involved in the decision. There's objectivity, okay? That's one thing. The second thing is we don't have a system of justice which is independent of religion. So whatever religious biases and prejudices that we have as a system of justice, not as people, but as a system of justice that doesn't depend on religion, is something we can say that we don't have to factor into our judicial decisions. We always are going to have to look at, because we have a Christian supposedly background and Christian supposedly culture and so forth, we're always going to have to consider religious factors and religious morals, religious ethics in what we do, okay? So there are several factors in our objectivity, in our discussion of criminality or innocence, okay, that are inherently subjective, inherently, okay? And as such, recognizing this, our criminal justice system and our judicial reviews have established that there are several cases of public speaking which are not crimes, okay? One of them is political speech, and the other one is advertising speech, okay? So that means that somebody can advertise for a company, or they can campaign on a political trail, and they can say things that are clearly not true, and it won't be a crime. Okay, businesses do this all the time. They advertise capabilities and it's like saying that this will make you a king if you buy it, or saying that this will cure all your headaches and so forth. There's disclaimers involved that will eliminate any criminal responsibility for these claims if they turn out not to be true. There are legal disclaimers that cover the issue of saying something that is evidently not true in the description, okay? Red Bull won't give you wings, for example, okay? There is just a number of different escape clauses written into the law to cover this. These falsehoods, these patent falsehoods or evidentiary falsehoods, because that's part of how we do business in our system of capitalism and Western socialism, or whatever you want to call it. We cannot hold each other specifically to task for what people say that is not expected to be true based on historical patterns, okay? People lie to sell things. People lie to convince people of things. People lie in court, and people lie to testify for other people. These are things that we know happen. So we don't take eyewitness testimony as 100% true. We don't take what someone heard about somebody else as to be 100% true. And what we have in our society is we have a complete social block of people who lie like dogs about everything, just trying to get people to believe enough of what they say to do things that they will regret later, which is what fraud is. Okay, that's called fraud, is to manipulate people's understanding of reality to a degree where they will believe it's a good idea for them to do things that they should not do. Okay, so let's talk about good versus bad, or good versus evil, or truth versus lies, okay, or right versus wrong. Okay, so we know that we fundamentally have a criminal justice system and a legal system and a government which are all operating under the principle that there will be some good and bad in everything, some truth and some lies in what people say. Okay, that there will be rights and wrongs committed in life, and that we cannot and should not ever expect anything to ever be completely good, always truthful, and never bad, and never wrong. Okay? So how does religion work in that environment? When we believe that God is always good, never evil, and that the stories that we were taught in Sunday school or handed down from our parents or from our social leaders or religious leaders are true in that environment, where everything else that we do and say, we understand that there's an element of truth, there's always a risk of lies and fraud involved. How does religion interact with the rest of life? It doesn't very well, because people will get very upset and very mad, okay, about religion when they understand that they have limited, if any, rights to get upset and mad about just being lied to. If somebody tells you about God, that's one thing. If they talk to you about the guy around the corner that lives down the street from you, okay, that's another thing. People have fought and died in wars over religion for thousands of years, for probably as long as mankind's history. Okay, so there is no doubt whatsoever that to talk about religious issues is one thing, but to talk about everything else is fine. Okay, so my problem is, what do we do now when we start to have a discussion about truth and lies, about good and bad, about good versus evil, about right versus wrong, with a guy who is a serial fraudster like Donald Trump? Okay, we ultimately have to realize that Trump lies to us, has lied to lots of people, has been convicted of lying, is probably lying at this moment to somebody. We know that because he's famous for it. But the issue is that people see that the evil and the bad of him lying outweighs the bad of voting for the Democratic Party. Okay, we've gotten to a point now where Trump is an acceptable evil to a large percent of the country. They know he's lying. They know he's lying. Half of them are contributing to the lies that are being passed around. They don't care as long as the Republicans win the election. As long as Republicans win elections, Democrats and liberals don't win elections. Okay? But here's the kicker. How does it all play with guys that put their life on the line for this country? How does it all play for guys who talk about stolen valor, when Trump constantly steals the valor of others, of good parents, of good husbands, of good businessmen, of good loan risks, of good people, good Christians? He's constantly saying that he is the best ever at any category of person ever mentioned in the conversation. Okay? But the real problem is, what happens when he goes to people who are historically repressed in a society and says, I'm the best president for you that there has ever been since Abraham Lincoln? How do you deal with a guy who lies all the time, who gets in your face and lies yet again? He's not necessarily getting in the face of MAGA today and lying in their face. He certainly probably has, but again, they passively accept his lying because in the long run, they're happy to have a strong Republican candidate, and they will support this Republican candidate against hellfire, okay, rather than vote for a Democrat. But what happens in the inevitable time when that liar keeps lying and lies so bad, so often, that he runs up against something that is a holy truth? Okay? What happens then? He has walked up into a situation where he has selected a running mate who is a veteran of foreign wars when Trump refused to even get selected for the draft by coming up with this whole scheme about bone spurs. Okay? It's not just that. How many times has Trump talked about how quickly he would solve a war, solve a crisis, all this stuff? All he has to do is reach out with his holy hand and touch the situation and he'll solve the problem. How many times has he said that? And how many problems, how many crises has he created by saying that? By even being part of the situation? How many times? I'm not going to list them here. It would take 15, 30 more minutes for me to sit here and go through his whole personal background. The problem is that people don't see his personal background as a problem because they're so concerned about the fact that he's a Republican and they don't want to elect a Democrat. They're looking at the one issue that's shielding them from all the other failures in his past. Okay? But when a man claims to be the best at everything and has no faults and is saying that everybody on the Democratic side, all of his opposition, is just engaged in a witch hunt against him, that they've weaponized the government against him. Okay, when he says this, it's almost like spitting in the face of the truth because that is just not the case. But let's examine how we know that's not the case, okay? First of all, if you tell enough lies long enough, it is clear that at some point you're going to tell a lie where people are going to look at you and go, "You're crazy." Now, I'm assuming that at least some Republicans look at Trump and say he's crazy, but they're just not going to go and come out and say it, okay? But there are Republicans who obviously have moral ethics. At least some moral ethics. They're not like a person who has no moral ethics, okay? They obviously have some moral ethics. They might still be Republicans, but they still have moral ethics. And that means that there's an inherent conflict in these people between being a Republican and having moral ethics. And where is that evident more strongly than in somebody who has fought in a war and is acclaimed and has a record that they fought valiantly, compared to somebody who says people who fight in wars and lose or get killed or get captured are losers. What does Trump think about people who fought in wars and didn't get killed, didn't get captured? Does he think they're winners? Well, let's put it this way. When has Trump ever made the claim that he was in a war? Ever. The one claim that you won't hear Trump make is that he was in actual combat, at least until he got shot at in Burke, Pennsylvania. Then suddenly he wants to claim that he took a bullet for democracy, as in he was in actual combat. Trump was not in actual combat. He was shot at. And the question that you have to ask to get from one to the other is, would he have been on that stage talking if he had known that there was a guy sitting there 150 yards away with a rifle who was going to shoot at him? Would he have done it? Would he consciously have gone to war knowing that there were enemy soldiers and an enemy army that were going to try to kill him? Would he have done it? No, of course he wouldn't. He wouldn't even join the freaking military when he got drafted. He talked his way out of joining the military. Okay, there's no way in hell that Trump is personally going to go down to the border and actually go out there in the desert and try to stop these migrants like he's stopping the border and stopping migration and securing the border. He loves to talk himself into situations where he definitely will not actually do anything about what he's talking about, not physically. Okay, there's the cheating on his wife, cheating on multiple wives. He's cheated on every wife he had. So how can you compare him to a good husband? He's called people by all kinds of slanderous terms. So how can you call him an honest person? He's dismissed the claims of the victims in several cases that are pending in front of court, and he's already been judged in court. He's refused to abide by legal decisions. How can you call him an honest person who's not a criminal? So when he says that he's this great guy, who is he doing the people who he's taking this valor from in saying it? What's he doing to them? He's taking their credibility, their honesty, their integrity, as if it's his own. And how can that work well with somebody who's actually fought in combat? How can somebody who has fought a war for this country, gone overseas, not just taken rounds for, in combat for real, but walked into a combat situation, served in combat, did their tour duty, did a good job as a combat soldier, and came back to the United States, ran for Congress on the background of that, okay, got selected as VP on the background of that, and eventually realizes he's just being used by Trump. He's just covering Trump's weaknesses. If he's loyal to Trump, fine, okay, but how can he be loyal to Trump? How can he honestly look at Donald Trump and respect him, knowing that? How can anybody who's religious, who's a real Christian, look at Donald Trump and listen to him say, what's your favorite Bible verse? What's your favorite Bible, whatever it is, I forgot the guy said. And he says all of them. How can he possibly love equally every verse in the Bible? How is that? What kind of maniac would say something like that? And it just glides on down the road. It just glosses over them. Okay? It just glosses over them. Because they're that much of a fan for Trump, despite all of those ethical and moral considerations. But the moment that a Democrat shows the slightest issue with honesty, integrity, with being a good person, okay, with being truthful, or as they say in the MAGA world, being the right person for the job. The moment that they show the slightest issue, Republicans are all over it. I mean, like dogs on it, like a pack of hunting dogs, all over that person's weaknesses. Because they don't want to just say that they don't like this person because he's a Democrat. They don't want to just say, no, we are not going to say we don't like you because you're a Democrat. We're going to say we don't like you because you're a liberal, because you're a liar, you're a fraudster, okay, you're a crook, you're a criminal, all those things. And that's kind of SOP in politics, right? What's not SOP is saying that you weren't born in the United States. That's never been an acceptable attack angle until they use it on Obama. Maybe Trump has kind of forgotten that for years and years and years, he accused Obama of being born in Kenya. He had to refer to Obama as Obama Hussein, Barack Hussein Obama. He had to throw in this third term, which is what normally happens when people are accused of criminal offenses. They will talk about their first name, their second name, their last name. He has to have this whole doubt and criticism and not overt hatred, but at least subliminal hatreds towards blacks. He had to pose Obama, who is a devout Christian, okay, as a Muslim before he ran for president, while he ran for president and after he was president for at least I think he just stopped doing it like last year. For at least the past 10 years, Trump has run around spreading this lie, perpetuating this lie that Obama was a Muslim. And thereby galvanizing the MAGA community against him, Obama, not just because he's black, but also because he's a Muslim. He wasn't even a legitimate candidate for president. That was Trump saying that over and over and over again, okay? Just as Trump has said over and over again that Hillary Clinton should be locked up, convicted of a crime and locked up for having classified data on a server that wasn't an official government server. Trump then made that a whole campaign, like saving Jerusalem from the Arabs. Okay, over and over and over again, time and time and time and time and time again, Trump has been spewing this bullshit talking about Hillary Clinton. He just finally, recently, got called on it by the press, and the press finally said, so you have stopped calling Obama a Muslim and stopped saying that he's not a legitimate president and that he was born in Kenya. And I think this last year he finally stopped actually saying that. But with Clinton, he said he didn't actually have her being chased by a mob, by the MAGA mob, okay, over the server thing. And he said he never said that they should lock her up. He never said that. He's on record as saying he never said that he said lock her up. He never said that. The next day, what do? They pull out an old tape of him actually saying that at one of his rallies. Lock her up, lock her up, lock her up, lock her up. So it's hard to imagine how Trump could be a worse candidate for blacks if he plays into this long-standing belief that blacks can't be trusted, blacks are notorious for causing trouble, and blacks people are causing crime, and blacks are the dregs of society. When he actually embodies that entire personality himself, how is he a good candidate for blacks to raise these issues? Okay? That we all know as Americans that for Trump to say that he's a good candidate for blacks is not helping blacks. That's obvious. That whole argument goes nowhere. It just is. It is never a good thing for a white politician to say they're a good candidate for blacks, which is why we have so many black candidates and why we have people who say they don't want anything to do with whites, and why we have people who say that they cannot trust white people to represent their interests of minorities. That's the entire basis for that kind of reverse racism. Okay, and if there's one person in politics who we cannot trust, it's Donald Trump. My question is, why does J.D. Vance think that he can literally run with this man as vice president and not have that same shit rub off on him? If he calls himself a man of honor, then he can't be a candidate for, he can't even vote for Trump, much less be a vice president. So I find this whole situation to have a whole mess of potential disaster for a lot of politicians when they admit that, yeah, what they're saying isn't true, but because he's a Republican, they're going to vote for him anyway. And the question is that going to have any effect whatsoever in the election? Or are they literally just going to stick to party lines? And we just go to another presidency, another 4 years, and fuck everything that's being said right now. Honestly, just forget it.